When I stopped my cholesterol medication, I was told my numbers would spike. They didn't. They got better. Not slightly better. Better than any reading I'd had in 11 years on the medication. My LDL came down 32% in 14 months and I hadn't taken a single statin. I'm Neil, 13 years of NHS blood tests, all of it documented. What I found is that the mechanism behind cholesterol is a lot more connected to what you eat and when you eat than I'd been led to believe. And if you've been told fasting and cholesterol don't mix, the next 10 minutes might reframe that, because the same process that manages blood sugar also affects how your liver produces cholesterol, and your body doesn't care whether you've been told it's supposed to be a problem. First, the myth. Why fasting is supposed to be dangerous for cholesterol levels, where that idea comes from, and what the biology actually says. Then my data. What happened to my LDL, HDL, and the cholesterol to HDL ratio across 11 years on medication versus 14 months off it. And then the mechanism, why fasting addresses the driver that statins don't, and what my GP said when she saw the results that she wasn't expecting. We start with the morning. I stopped the medication and waited for the numbers to blow up. So the conventional guidance, and it's not wrong to have believed it, I believed it for years, goes roughly like this. High cholesterol is a risk factor for heart disease. Statins reduce cholesterol. Therefore, if your cholesterol is high, you take statins, and if you start changing things, fasting, cutting food groups, doing anything drastic, your cholesterol could spike unpredictably. So keep taking the medication and change your diet carefully, if at all. That reasoning isn't unreasonable. The guidelines exist because the data exists. High LDL over time does appear in the same frame as cardiovascular risk, and statins do reduce LDL in clinical trials. That's not contested. What I didn't understand for a long time is the mechanism underneath it. The reason cholesterol rises isn't primarily because you're eating too much dietary cholesterol. Your liver makes most of it, and what drives the liver to produce more isn't fat in the diet. It's refined carbohydrates and the insulin response they trigger. Sarah Berry, nutrition scientist, King's College London, put it plainly in research I've had logged for a while. Diet alone can reduce LDL by up to 30%, equivalent to statin level effect from dietary change. That's not a fringe view, that's KCL research published through Zoe. The myth isn't that statins don't work for some people. The myth is that they address the underlying driver, and that fasting or dietary change couldn't possibly match them. My data suggests otherwise. For me, N equals 1. 13 years of NHS blood tests. April 2012, first cholesterol test, where it's flagged as a problem. Total cholesterol 7.5. GP note, need to speak to doctor. That's where it started. Atorvastatin, 40 milligrams begins. Standard first line treatment. Nothing controversial about that decision at the time. Here's the before picture. I've got the actual numbers across 13 years. 2012, total cholesterol 7.5. On statins from that point. LDL 4.4. Ratio 4.7. That's the cholesterol to HDL ratio, which is actually the more useful number because it shows the balance of what's circulating rather than the raw total. December 2016, ezetimibe added, now on dual medicine. Total cholesterol, and you'd expect it to have dropped, 5.3 that 1 year, then rising again across subsequent tests. The ratio by then, 6.2 up from 4.7. That means my cardiovascular risk profile by the ratio measure had worsened 32% across 9 years on dual medication. That's all logged. By July 2020, cholesterol 7.3 to 7.4, still on statins, still prescribed. GP reviewing results August 2020, same story, 7.3. December 2023, peak total cholesterol 8. LDL 5.6, that's 27% worse than the 4.4 it was in 2012 when the statin conversation started. HDL 1.3, declining. The ratio now 6.2, and I'm still on dual medicine. Atorvastatin 40 milligrams plus ezetimibe 10 milligrams. December 2023 is also when my GP looked at those results and said, everything looks fine, stay on your medication. That was his honest read of the situation. From a managed care perspective, he wasn't wrong. I was on the medication. The medication was doing its job of suppressing one number, but the trajectory over 11 years, when you lay out all the tests together, wasn't going in the right direction. My liver was also showing strain, ALT 69, which is 73% above the upper reference limit. Statins are known to put pressure on the liver. That wasn't a surprise, and it wasn't dramatic, but it was there in the data. 11 years, multiple blood tests, cholesterol never below 6 on medication. Trend overall up. Boxing Day 2023, I stopped eating the way I'd eaten for most of my adult life. 18:6 fasting, eating window from noon till 6. In truth, I averaged 17:7. Non-UPF foods, nothing more complicated than that. And I also did a 10-day water fast and a 17-day water fast in the first couple of months. My prescriptions had lapsed in October 23 when I moved surgeries. Mid-February 24, the remaining medication ran out. I made the decision not to renew. That's honest. There was no prior GP conversation about stopping. I had 13 years of blood tests in a folder. I'd watched the trajectory and I made that call. I disclose this every time because I never suggest anyone do the same. It was a decision. The monitoring that followed was transparent with my GP. The internet is very clear. Stopping statins suddenly can cause a rebound. Cholesterol shoots up, inflammation rises. I genuinely expected something to blow up. I'd been on the medication for over 11 years, on some of them for more than 20 years. In the case of allopurinol, I just waited. Nothing blew up. 1 month later, March 24, first blood test off all meds. Total cholesterol 7, not dramatically lower yet, but, and this is the number that surprised me, alt liver enzyme down from 69 to 28 in 1 month with no medication and 3 months of healthy eating and fasting. A 59% improvement. My GP's words at that review, this is better than on statins. Let me walk you through what happened to the cholesterol numbers specifically, because this is the story. March 24, 1 month off medication, total 7, LDL 4.7, already down from 5.6. That's a 16% improvement in the first month off statins. First month. April 2025, 14 months off medication, total 7.11. LDL 3.8, down 32% from the 5.6 peak. HDL 1.5, up from 1.3. That's 15% improvement in HDL in 14 months. Ratio 4.7, within target, for the first time since 2016. November 25, 21 months off medication, total 6.77. The ratio 4.8, holding within target. The LDL in this test is reported differently. The Samson's equation, which calculates rather than measures directly, so I don't compare it to the April figure. The ratio is the honest number and the ratio is held. And then the liver. By November 2025, alt was 10, down from 69 in December 2023. 86% reduction, the lowest reading in 13 years of records. That one genuinely surprised me. I wasn't tracking the liver story, but I was watching the cholesterol. But the liver came with it. The alt number tells you something about what the statins were costing that you don't feel in real time. I'll put it plainly. On statins across 11 years, the cholesterol to HDL ratio worsened by 32% and never reached target. Off statins across 14 months, the ratio improved to within target and has held there. That's one person's data. Tracked and documented. I'm not a cardiologist and I can't tell you what would have happened if I hadn't started fasting at the same time, but I can tell you what the numbers show. My GP started looking forward to my blood tests almost as much as I do, which probably says something about the state of the NHS, but also about what's possible when you actually change the inputs. 13 years of data, all of it documented here. Subscribe if you want to follow. What my data suggests, and it's one person's data, 13 years, N equals 1, is that for me, the driver behind rising cholesterol wasn't something statins could fix. The numbers went up on the medication for 11 years. They came down off it during a period when I changed what and when I was eating. The mechanism that seemed to matter was insulin. When the eating window shortened and the refined carbohydrates reduced, the liver started behaving differently. LDL came down, HDL up. The ratio moved into target for the first time in almost a decade. Think of it this way. LDL is the delivery driver dropping parcels at the wrong address, your arterial wall instead of the right destination. HDL is the returns driver, picking up misdelivered parcels and taking them back to the liver to be processed. What drives LDL out of balance isn't primarily fat in your diet, it's the liver overproducing it in response to refined carbohydrates and elevated insulin. Sarah Berry at King's College describes this precisely. Excess refined carbs cause the liver to convert those carbs to saturated fat, which then suppress the very receptor responsible for clearing LDL from your blood. The statins were interfering with one enzyme. The fasting was addressing the signal that was driving the problem in the first place. That's what my data reflects. That's the honest read of 13 years of NHS blood tests. This doesn't mean everyone should stop statins. There are people for whom statins are genuinely the right call. High-risk cardiac patients, significant family history of heart disease, people who've already had a cardiac event. That conversation is with your GP, and it's a different conversation to mine. I had 13 years of blood tests, a documented trajectory, and I made a decision. It's not a template. It was a data point for me. And there's one more thing worth saying, because not everyone watching this is on statins. Some of you are watching because your GP has mentioned your numbers are something to keep an eye on, or because you've noticed things feel slightly off and you haven't had the conversation yet. The mechanism here, the way the liver responds to insulin load, the way eating patterns affect what gets produced and what gets cleared, that process doesn't start when someone hands you a prescription. It runs quietly for years before anyone puts a name on it. The data that shows up in a cholesterol panel is the downstream signal of something happening upstream. Understanding that process before the medication conversation starts is, in my view, more useful than waiting until after it. If you're on statins or any cholesterol medication, and this has made you curious about your own numbers, the conversation to have is with your GP, not instead of, with. If you want to go deeper on the data, the full timeline, the evidence IDs, the exact numbers for every test, the link in the description takes you to the free 7-day fasting blueprint. It covers how I structured the eating window during this period and what the reasoning was. And one more time, clearly this is educational content. It's not medical advice. Never stop or change cholesterol medication without speaking to your GP first.